Testing, testing. And you're going to be mic 2.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. Grab your seat. We're going to be discussing real estate. Elias will be happy. This is his focus. So, in Davos, things always change. One of our panelists fell ill. He's running a fever, and in consideration for all of you, he decided not to come here and infect us all. So we can thank him for that. But it's just two of us here. My name's Jim Harris. I'm an international best-selling author. I focus on AI, tech, innovation, and disruption. And we're going to have a discussion, as you can see behind me, on real estate investing. Marcus, do you want to introduce yourself to the gang here?
Yes, hello. Hi, Jim. Hello, everybody. My name is Marcus Schulz. I'm CEO of Standardland. We're an international real estate investment firm. We're based in Berlin, in Luxembourg, and in Abu Dhabi. We're very much focused on Middle Eastern capital to be brought to Europe. We are the only European company right now that has 2 Sharia-licensed investment funds at the ADGM in Abu Dhabi, especially for investments into Europe, because we do believe that at the moment the dry powder in that region is much more accessible than in Europe because of the recent real estate shocks and the political uncertainty and all these factors, which especially brought the German real estate market down completely over the last couple of years. So we decided to go the other way, and we decided to kind of make a bet on presence in Arabia, Sharia licensed funds, tokenization of real estate. So we are trying to do things a bit differently, but still investing into a rather conservative asset class.
Interesting. The first thing I'd like to ask is real estate is very much dependent on nation states, policy, and so on. I'm from Canada, and Canada changed its immigration policy, and demand for condos is down substantially because the number of immigrants has decreased. So that's a Canadian phenomena. Would you agree that we need to look at the market country by country in order to understand the market?
You know, they always say real estate is a local business, but there are certain factors which all real estate investments and markets have in common: capital sources, risk assessment. You know, there's global shifts, ESG alignment, urbanization, smart cities, make it more liquid. The market cap of real estate is $400 trillion US. The market cap of stocks is 100 trillion. But what do people trade? They trade stocks. Real estate is much more illiquid, So how do you make real estate a global asset which is easily tradable? I think that's a question which concerns all real estate markets. So yes, there is for sure always a local component to real estate investment, immigration, politics, all sorts of, especially, let's say, interest rates for if you're in development of residential for rent, that's a very decisive factor. But there's also global implications which basically account for all the real estate industry. So it's not a black and white answer I can give you here.
Another thing, just to start, I want to explore is in many countries, there's an affordability crisis for housing. Young people just can't afford a house. And so one of the things I find interesting is China is relentless in its approach. And I've seen companies in China build 10-story apartment buildings in 28 hours. And it's not normal construction. It's seeing construction as manufacturing, where the majority of work is done in a manufacturing facility. And like Lego pieces, these prefabs that include wiring and plumbing and walls are just shipped on flatbed trucks and assembled by 3 cranes over 26 hours, like putting together Lego. And so to have a 10-story apartment in 26 hours is crazy. In Canada, it takes years. But Do you think this might be new ways of working in construction might impact affordability?
Look, multi-layered question again. I think affordable housing is not an industry-specific question, but it's one of the most decisive political questions of the next decade. I mean, globally. You know, the problem is that young people both have a job, cannot afford their own house anymore. On the other hand, you know, young people are much more mobile nowadays. They need a cell phone, they like to have an apartment. Less and less people want to have a garden and a fence and a house and all this stuff. Construction costs, you know, you saw what happened with the Ukraine war, COVID, this disruption of supply chain. Construction costs went infinite. Yeah, so you couldn't even build anything more. Now you're buying MPLs for 1/3 of the replacement value, because real estate developers just couldn't survive a 5-year period of not selling apartments anymore because everybody was scared. You know, the people wouldn't invest anymore. Everybody tried to keep his money together. So we have to find new ways to develop. We need to find new ways to construct, also in terms of ESG, energy consumption, you know, all these challenges that await us with data centers, how much energy they take, 5-fold, 6-fold of energy. Where do you want to take all the energy for that you need to produce in a conventional way dwellings? It's not possible. So we're going to focus on new technologies, on cheaper and faster ways to construct in order to make housing affordable again. What kind of housing, how it specifically looks, I think that's a question of taste and a question of generation. As I said, I don't think that we need a lot of single-family detached houses in the future anymore, because another thing is true, land is not produced anymore. So land is getting more valuable, you know, and the population is increasing. So we need to kind of learn to live a little bit more with a little bit of less space, a little bit more efficient, but we're for sure also much more mobile than 2 or 3 generations before us were. So yes, we are focusing very much on modular housing. We believe that this is the technology of the future, and also the speed. I mean, the speed of construction and the speed of permitting, they go hand in hand. Yeah, because a lot of capital is lost on the way. If you have to wait for a permit for 5 years as a developer and you're sitting on your cast, that increases then the prices of your house. You know, so I think there's a political effort, there's a technical effort, and there's also an effort by the financial markets. Nowadays, 2/3 of the GDP of the US is tech. You know, this is money that's not invested anywhere else. We might reshift a little bit of our focus on other questions, because housing, in my opinion, is an essential question of mankind. And we should focus, you know, not to provoke more social uproar, because with AI and all this artificial intelligence, productivity of AI will rise, productivity of people will be lower, but the lower will vote. And these people might not be okay with a couple of people earning the whole money and they're not being able to afford dwellings. So I think
you're opening big cans of questions here.
No, but you know, I think it's all connected. I mean, you cannot see housing. Housing is an essential need of mankind. It's not like bubble gum. Yeah, it is something that everybody needs. People want to have families. People want to live. It's one of the essential questions. So, of course, it's a political question as much as it is a capital markets question.
So I want to turn to co- and tri-generation. So for those who don't know what it is, if you, for instance, burn coal, 2/3 of the energy from burning coal goes up the stack as wasted heat. And then we take, 100 units of energy, burn coal, so you only get 33 units out. And then we put them in high voltage, high tension lines, and you lose 10 to 15% there. And then you bring it into your home and you put it in an incandescent light bulb and you get 6 units of energy out of it. So we started with 100 units of energy and we end up with 6, which is insane. We don't need more power stations. We need better end use. So co- and tri-generation takes that supposedly waste heat from generation and puts it through homes and district heating and hospitals and hot water for sanitizing things in hospitals. So do you see a trend around, because you raised the ESG, environmental angle, so do you see this as a trend, co- and tri-generation and district heating in your markets?
Look, my father was an engineer. He always wanted to become an engineer, became a lawyer. He was very disappointed. So I would love to answer your question in a little bit more technical knowledge. But in terms of energy, with my very little knowledge about the topic, I think we need to find new ways to generate energy. We need to find new ways to recycle energy. We need to massively invest into the grid. That's the problem that we got. So cogeneration, I think, is inevitable, right? We need to find new ways to kind of, that's why ESG came up, because smart people saw that we're running out of energy resources and that we should start to kind of be a little bit more careful with the energy that we have on this planet because it's limited, right? Everything that is here is moving in one atmosphere. So to answer your question, I do believe that these new technologies are key, but ESG is being sacrificed a little bit at the moment of the altar of political disruptions. Yeah, and then it's labeled as being very woke, and it's not as good and it's not as interesting as it used to be a couple of years ago, but big investment funds, and they are basically the ruling players on the real estate market for a long time, next to the family offices, the PEs. They have guidelines which will only allow them in the future to invest into certain ESG labeled or proven assets. So naturally, the selection will be done eventually. I think the pace is not as quick as it used to be, but I think the direction is clear, and I don't think that's going to change.
So one of the things that's interesting, globally, the cheapest form of electricity, number one, is energy efficiency, which is unseen and undiscussed. Second cheapest is solar. We've seen solar agreements, PPAs, at basically 1 cent a kilowatt hour. You can't even run a nuclear power plant, OPEX, for 1 cent, let alone OPEX and CAPEX over 20 years. So we're seeing these huge shifts, and I imagine a time where every northern hemisphere building will have thin-clad solar on the southern face of it and be its own power generation. And developers will build that in because it's cheaper for people, both CapEx and OpEx, to own it. So have you seen, and that's an example of an ESG drive, that we really don't need anything, any policy other than taking any regulatory barriers out of the way?
Look, I think as this title says, we're talking about large-scale real estate projects. And this is a good question because nowadays developers are not singular developers anymore. They are urban creators. So you're creating basically a neighborhood, an environment, the infrastructure. So as a developer, you have to think about many more things than you had to do in the past. Yeah, accessibility, social mobility. It got very complex. So of course, alternative energy sources are absolute key for developing this 10-minute cities, which they do a lot in GCC already and in other geographies. Sometimes in Europe, we're a little bit, because of our regulations, and we're a little bit behind on these ideas. But in general, I believe that that we have to take into account to use all possible energy which we can, even though solar is actually not as powerful as many other power sources which are being explored right now. So new technologies are coming, and I don't know what in 10 or 15 years will be on a building, or if something's coming out of the soil. But for sure, we will go for different power sources than only grid.
I want to take this opportunity to open questions from the audience, and I'll just bring you a microphone. And if you can state your question, we'll have our panelists answer it.
Thank you very much. A quick question to you. Could you describe us the technology that you have in you mentioned about mobile homes. Could you just give us an idea of how this works? I'm Katerina, because I'm based in London and Athens, so international lawyer.
So technologies that at the moment are being focused on very much is how to kind of how to replace manual labor and how to produce the intensity of material use. The energy which is inducted is still kind of conventional. Yeah, we have a lot of solar ideas with geothermal solutions. We have heat exchange pumps, But these, in my opinion, are only temporary solutions. I think that we have to come up with much more powerful and much more efficient energy solutions. I'm working, for example, with H2O solutions at the moment, where you kind of transform gas into H2O power sources. So this is something which is going to be completely new, much more energy powerful than any solar or grid solution. And I think that's only a fraction of things which is expecting us, because we all know, that our energy resources are not eternal. And you see in a geopolitical context how people fighting about these resources. So in order to prevent a global conflict which will affect us all, we'll have to find solutions, and rather quickly, before the world is taken by a couple of players in terms of resources.
So
Yes, we do 3D printing. Yes. That's one of the most essential parts of the prefabricated theme at the moment. Is 3D printing, and it's improving all the time. Before you were kind of trying to model it with concrete. Now you do 3D printing. It's all going very fast. You got to be there, but you also need to think about repositioning of standing investments, because, as I said, land is not produced anymore. It's a scarce asset. So you need to work with the assets that you have. You need to improve them and make them as resistant, as resilient as possible. Nowadays, you're not investing only considering yield. You price the risk. That's what investors do nowadays when they develop. Because you got to price in political risk, regulatory risk, environmental risk. Before, the risks were only like interest rates, leasing risk, these kind of risks. But the risks have five-folded. So you got to be much more aware about what you're doing in terms of development.
The average time to build up a house is compared to the previous with the 3D printing.
Yes, it's possible. We're working with that concept at the moment. Goldman Sachs has just acquired for 600 million euros in Germany single-family houses, because they discovered this as an asset class. We've bought 1.5 million square meters around Berlin, permitted for housing in a distressed situation, and we want to put there energy-efficient prefabricated homes and sell the same, like do it for rent, because families in big cities like London, Paris, Berlin, they can't afford the rent anymore, because developers are not building. Rents are exploding, and the essential workers are being pushed out of town. And they have families, and they cannot survive in the cities anymore because they spend 50% on rent. So we got to find solutions for these people. Well, our solution is prefabricated to rent, then build it in a portfolio, 300, 400 units, and then sell the income stream. Because people who live in these buildings, they like to pay rent, and they like to keep their assets in good shape. So, that's kind of a strategy we have recently developed in conjunction with our partners.
I just want to say that the conflict over energy is old energy, oil, gas, coal, those kind of things. But more energy falls on Earth from the sun than all energy burned in a year by all countries. So 1 hour of sunlight on Earth is more than all energy sources added together, all nations, for an entire year. So we can just live within the energy stream of the sun. And it's also, as I said, the second most economical. Another question from our audience. Is there one? Going once. Going twice. Our panel is coming to an end. What final comment, Marcus, would you like to share with the group?
I'm not a lecturer. I'm trying to make business. But I'm a bit scared when I see at the moment the geopolitical shifts. We will need much more collaboration than separation in order to solve the conflicts and the challenges which are waiting us and which we also own to the next generation. So I'm skeptical that this is going to happen very soon. But I think everybody should remember that we have a responsibility all together as a society, that we are one society. And that we should find solutions, which are sustainable, not only for us, but for the people that come after us.
If you can join me in thanking Marcus for his fascinating insights today on the real estate market.